Hi, I'm Jeremiah Hersey, and today we're going to be talking about report page tooltips. So Power BI by default creates tooltips for you as you add additional columns into the visual. The problem with this though is that as you add additional columns, this is running continuously in the background for built-in default tooltips. With a report page tooltip though, it is only ran when you hover over the visual. So you're going to see some performance benefits with using report page tooltips versus the built-in default tooltips. So let's take a look at the Power BI desktop and get started. So here we are inside the Power BI desktop, and I just have a basic table in here of a list of failed banks, one measure that is just counting the rows in the table, and I have some geolocation spots from where the banks failed. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to build a basic visual. So I'm going to bring in a bar chart, and I'm going to look at total failed banks by state. So as I look at total failed banks by state, so there's going to be a default tooltip on this visual. And so we'll see that now. So as I scroll over, notice the two fields or columns that are being used, total failed banks and state, and it's giving me a representation, a default tooltip for this. But if, let's say I wanted to add from the closing date, I wanted to add the year into this visual. I'm going to do a little sorting here just to make this look a little bit better. So what you can see is now that I've added the year into the legend, our default tooltip now is going to give us the year added in. So as you add additional columns into your visual, the default tooltip will be added to produce that information. Once again, as this is being ran though, all of these columns are being targeted. You can add additional tooltips inside of your visual in the tooltip section, but once again, the more columns you add into this tooltip section, the lower the performance is going to be. So to give us a better way to report on this visual itself, we're going to create a report page tooltip. So what we're going to do is we're going to go down here to the bottom and we're going to create a new page. And this is going to be my tooltip page. And I'm going to go ahead and hide this page because as you publish out to the Power BI service, you don't want your end users navigating directly to this tooltip page. You want them to use the functionality and the features that we create for them. So we want to go ahead and hide this tooltip page from our end users. So there's a couple settings that we need to change on this page. So we're going to click the Format Paintbrush under the Visualization section. So there's two things that we have to turn on and a third that I'd like to. So under Page Information, there's a toggle for tooltip. We have to identify that this page is going to be used for a tooltip. So step one is to, under page information, turn the tooltip on. Step two is under the page size. Now, we do not want our tooltip popping up 16 by 9 on top of our report that's 16 by 9. You're not going to be able to see anything. So I like to change this to a tooltip. Now you can also use a custom size as well. I like to use the built-in tooltip page size. Now when you do this, you're going to get a preview of the actual size of your tooltip. This is the size that the tooltip is going to be when we use it in our report. So it makes it a little difficult to see because in design because of how small it is. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up here to the top to our view ribbon. So we're going to go to our view ribbon at the top, and we're just going to make this fit to page. So that way we have a full canvas to work with. The last thing that I like to change is because my page right now is a white background, I want to make sure my tooltip sticks out from that white background. So what I'm going to do is under the page background, in the visualization pane, I'm just going to change this color to a light gray. Now, in order to see this color, for some reason, it's set to transparency as 100%. If it's 100% transparency, you're not going to see the color. So you need to adjust that transparency down to see that color. So now that I have my tooltip, it's going to be distinguished from the report page with that gray background. I can now start adding items into the tooltip that I want to see. Now, once again, I want to see how many failed banks. I want to see maybe what year it is and potentially what state as well. So let's start off with a card visual. So I'm going to click the card. That's the 1, 2, 3. And card visuals are good for just displaying some basic information. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the total failed banks measure that I have right here in this card. So total failed banks in this case is 563. I'm just going to copy this and paste it so it's the same exact size as the other one. And I'm just going to remove that field. And I'm going to bring in the year because we want it to tell us what year it is. So I'm going to grab the year. Now, the problem right now is that it's counting all the years together. So what I want to do is I want to change that to either a minimum or a maximum. And what that's going to do is as I hover over the individual data points, it's going to determine what the minimum and what the maximum is from that segment. And so I'll show you how it reads that here in a second. I don't like this data category label, so I'm going to turn the category label off on this. I just want the year. Total failed banks, that looks good. And let's maybe add a map in here as well. So I'm going to add a map. I'll put it right here. I'm going to bring in my geolocation, city, state. And if you're going to be using columns for mapping purposes, it's important to make sure the data category is set. So if you select the column, here at the top, you can set the data category. So this one is a combination of the city and the state, so I labeled it as a place. But you can also see that there is city and there's also state as well. So you would set your data category to whatever your column represents. This helps for mapping purposes. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put in the total failed banks into the size right there. And I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this title up here at the top we don't really need it. And turn that off. All right, so we have our tooltip created. I'm going to kind of make this look a little bit better here. There we go. And so the only thing that we have left to do is on the page itself, you're going to see a section for tooltip. So whatever you put in this column is going to allow the tooltip feature to work. So for instance, whatever visual we're using, so I'm going to go back to my first page. So this particular visual, all right, is using state, year, and total failed banks. I can also see that from the tooltip as well. So those are the three columns that this visual is using. So if I want this visual to leverage the tooltip feature, I need to either put the state, the year, or the measure right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the state column into my tooltip section. So I'm going to say any visual that uses this state column is going to be able to leverage this tooltip. The keep on all filters means that whatever filters that you have applied on the first page is going to affect the tooltip. But that is it. That is all we have to do. So let's go back to our page. And now when we hover over a particular section, notice it's giving us a map. There's a map of Georgia, how many failed banks, what year it is, and this is going to dynamically change based on where we're at. Very cool functionality. So notice that minimum, right? The minimum of the year 2010. So what it's doing is it's looking in this section and it's finding the minimum year from within that section, which is in this case 2012, represented by the legend. So this is only going to work if we have our bar chart broken up in different segments by year, such as we have. If we were to remove that, so I'm going to select my visual real quick. I'm going to remove the legend. Notice that it's just going to give me the minimum year now, which is 2000. So it doesn't matter which one it is. It's going to give me 2000 because it's looking for the minimum date within that section. And so when we add that legend in there for our year, then it allows it to look at the minimum or the maximum you could use within that section. So that is how we got that to work properly. But let's say that you have multiple visuals that use state. So I'm just going to copy this visual and paste it again. So we have two visuals exactly the same. Both of them are going to use that report page tooltip. But what if I do not want this visual to use that one? So all your formatting options are under this format paintbrush in the visualization pane. So with your visual selected, I'm going to go to the format paintbrush and I'm going to scroll down until I see tooltip. Notice the tooltip right now is on and it's set to a report page tooltip. So you can change this. This is where you change your tooltips at. So I can change this back to a default tooltip. And notice now when I hover over it, I get the basic default tooltip. Or I can choose a report page tooltip. It's going to ask me what page the tooltip's on, and that's going to be our tooltip page. So you can have multiple report page tooltips and attach them to different visuals. Once again, the benefit here is that these report page tooltips only run when we hover over the visual. It's not going to run continuously in the background, which is going to help our performance. So when you have a choice between using default tooltips or report page tooltips are going to give you a little bit better performance because they are not run continuously. They're only run when you hover over the visual. As we're looking at these different visuals, I'm going to go ahead and delete this one. We have the ability to look at this on multiple different ways. So let's say I want to add in a new visual. I'm going to look at a line chart. I'll look at total failed banks by year. So this particular visual, okay, notice the tooltip, the default tooltip there. I don't have the option to use the tooltip I created in this visual because it does not use the state column from my failed banks table. Only visuals that leverage the column state will be able to use that tooltip. So if I were to, let's say, add state in here, okay, notice that it's not able to process it correctly because it's processing it from the legend itself. So if I were to change this, okay, notice that now that it's in my axis, that report page tooltip is now working correctly. All right, so in order to use these report page tooltips, you have to have the column that you put in the tooltip section available inside of the visual itself. Well, thanks for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one.